I'm Dr. Kellam in the biology department. Biology is a really broad field, and so there's many different ways of scientific investigations that take place in our department by different faculty members and students. For instance, I mostly study bird behavior, and most of that research takes place outdoors in the field. My drive isn't for fame or wealth or patents or copyrights or anything like that. It's just to discover new information about our world. Why do animals do the things that they do? How do they interact with their environment and with each other? These questions can be answered using the scientific method. But contrary to what many students might have been taught, the scientific method can be modified according to one's needs. So for instance, I have 3 projects that I'm going to talk about, and for each of those 3 projects we use the scientific method in a slightly different way. First, I have a student research project going on that I'm supervising that is using a classic experimental design. What this means is that there is a treatment group that the student is measuring something, in this case tadpoles, and he's going to then compare another group of tadpoles that did not receive the treatment. And so then you can see what differences there are in measurement. Let's come on over here and I'll show you his setup. So, my student is starting, of course, with a hypothesis and then something that tests the hypothesis. He's got these tadpoles, they're bullfrog tadpoles. They're living in small aquaria, and he's exposing these tadpoles to a set of commonly used agricultural herbicides, and then he's going to be measuring the growth and health of the animals to see how they develop with the exposure of those herbicides. But then he's going to have some other tadpoles that are not exposed to the herbicide. They're getting the same treatments. They got the same shelter, the same water temperature, the same food, but again, no agricultural herbicide. And from there, he'll just be able to measure, again, the impact of the herbicide versus no herbicide, and he'll be able to tell how the tadpoles grow and develop. These kinds of experiments, where you have a control group and a treatment group, and you're comparing the two, are very, very useful. And that sort of thing takes place in science all the time. But I will say that they're not always realistic. That is, the outcome isn't always realistic, because in nature these tadpoles would be exposed to lots of other environmental conditions which may in fact be more important to the tadpole's development than the actual chemical exposure. You kind of need both. You need both kinds of experiments, one in the field, one in the lab, in order to get a really good grasp of what's going on in nature. A different way to do science is to take advantage of something called a natural experiment. You just take advantage of pre-existing conditions and collect data to test a hypothesis. So in this case, I'm standing here in the St. Vincent wetlands. You can see maybe some sort of orangey water behind me. These are human-constructed, abandoned mine drainage ponds meant to clean the water of pollutant. My hypothesis is that birds that build their nests near these ponds might be feeding food to the nestlings that are from these ponds, these polluted waters. And the reproductive success of these birds might be suppressed or reduced because of the poorer food supply. In the summer, I employ St. Vincent students to help me take data on the nests that are happening inside these boxes. There's tree swallows and bluebirds that like to nest in these boxes, and I'm again taking measurements on the nestlings and trying to figure out how healthy they are. But of course if I'm interested in the effects of the abandoned mine drainage pollution on these birds, I need to study birds that are not exposed to the polluted waters of our ponds. So elsewhere on campus, back behind the cemetery for instance, you will also find that I've placed bird boxes, and I monitor those nests as well. I need to collect data on the same species at the same time of year under basically all the same conditions, except the thing that's different is the distance to the ponds with the polluted water. Because it's not a laboratory system, I might get results that are contrary to my hypothesis. Maybe the birds know better than to feed poor quality food to their nest. I won't be able to support my hypothesis if that's true, but I will definitely still learn something, and that's the value of scientific investigation. Now, lastly, a third way of doing science from my perspective is to conduct what's called an observational study. And in this case, there's no experiment at all. I'm just looking for patterns in nature. And again, I'm still testing a hypothesis. An example would be in the spring, I'm also looking for woodpecker nests. That is my specialty, my training. And I look for woodpecker nests. They nest in hollow trees. And my hypothesis is that nests will be built in a certain kind of tree in a certain kind of condition, that there's actually a pattern. It doesn't even matter what kind of pattern I find, as long as I find a pattern. And if I do, then that suggests again that the woodpeckers are choosing where to build their nests, and we learn about what those choices are and maybe how to help protect them in the future. Science guides this investigation because I can combine lots of previous studies of woodpeckers to try and figure out what variables are most important for me to measure when I find a woodpecker nest. And so I'll measure a whole bunch of things. Now, there's no guarantee that the things that I've decided to measure are the things that are important to the birds. So the drawback from an observational study is that it often takes years of investigation and data collection to find these patterns and help us explain animal behavior. But the benefit is it's animals in nature and they're not being impacted by anything that the experimenter has done. Hopefully, observational studies are successful, and it's really cool when you find these patterns and have some idea as to why the animals are doing what they do.